A New World Market. This presentation will describe the Afro-Eurasian trade world before the voyages of Columbus, explain why and how Europeans undertook ambitious voyages of expansion, describe how conquest affected indigenous populations and brought about a new era of economic and cultural exchange, commercial empires, and forced migrations, and lastly, identify how new encounters shaped cultural values and beliefs in Europe and the New World. Many trade cities located around the Indian Ocean formed an autonomous self-government system and self-interest, limited violence, and attempts to monopolize trade. Malacca became an important trading post of Chinese silk, porcelains, and other products. Mongol emperors opened China to trade with the West and encouraged others, such as Marco Polo, to do business there. China had taken the lead in exploration with expeditions consisting of hundreds of ships and thousands of men. These were more diplomatic than economic. India was also a center of trade along the Indian Ocean routes. It was a link between the Persian Gulf and Southeast Asian trade networks. Hinduism and Buddhism arrived in Southeast Asia from India during the Middle Ages. Many of India's products, such as pepper and cotton, were also traded on the Indian Ocean routes. This map is of the 15th century Afro-Eurasian trading world. The trade routes connected people with diverse languages, cultures, and religions. Some were connected with similar language patterns or diets common to their environment. The population was not widespread, but very dense along the rice-producing areas and throughout the cities. Women tended to have a higher status in the Indian Ocean region because they planted and harvested rice, an important economic commodity. Grooms paid the bride, or sometimes her family, a sum of money called bride wealth. In China, India, and Europe, men controlled the women's dowry. West Africa had an important role in world trade. Most of the gold that reached Europe came from the Kingdom of Mali. Transported across the Sahara on camels, the gold was sold in North African port cities. Slaves became another important commodity transported on the African trade routes. The entire world practiced slavery, including the kingdoms within Africa. Arab and African merchants sold the slaves to Europeans, Egyptians, and populations throughout the Middle Eastern empires. The Middle Eastern merchants and traders served as intermediaries for the trade between Europe, Asia, and Africa. The region was dominated by the Persian Safavids and the Turkish Ottomans. The Ottomans controlled the eastern Mediterranean sea routes. Venice had been the main Italian trade city, but found Genoa to be its rival. After the Crusades, Genoa dominated the Black Sea route to Asia and expanded its routes as far as Persia and China. When Venice had control of the spice trade, the Genoese shifted from trade to finance. Slaves were a major commodity traded by both the Venetian and Genoese traders. The Italian system of trading influenced the Spanish as they began to develop their explorations and build their empire in the New World. The European population was growing again, following the devastating effects of the plague. The upswing in population created a demand for luxury goods and spices. The Muslim Ottoman Empire now had control of the city of Constantinople and blocked European demands. The Europeans needed to find alternate trade routes to avoid the negative impact of the Ottomans. Religious fervor influenced others to expand territorial holdings, which would provide an opportunity to save and convert others into Christianity. Others simply wanted to chart new waters and explore. There also was the constant lack of opportunity in the European states. They looked to the open sea for adventures and to escape poverty. The European crowns were also a part of the empire expansion push. The states were competitive and did not want the others to gain a financial and economic advantage. To educate sailors and push expeditions further into the Atlantic, Prince Henry of Portugal organized schools that taught navigation and sailing. The Portuguese developed the caravel, a small light sailing ship with 3 masts. The ship was much easier to maneuver than larger galley ships. When fitted with the cannon, they became formidable threats. The old publication of Ptolemy's Geography was recirculated and influenced a resurgence of interest in cartography and the development of navigational aids. The magnetic compass allowed sailors to determine their direction and position on the open sea. The astrolabe, invented by ancient Greeks, determined the altitude of the sun and other celestial bodies. The lateen sail allowed ships to tack against the wind. It was developed in the Indian Ocean trade routes and reached the Mediterranean on Arab ships. Prince Henry of Portugal became known as Prince Henry the Navigator because of his support for the study of geography and sailing. Portuguese sought to find the mythical figure of Prester John and gold, slaves, and an overseas route to India. They established ports along the Guinea coast and penetrated into the African continent. They continued to push down the western coast of Africa and rounded the Cape of Good Hope. Lisbon became an entrance port for Asian goods entering the European market. The Muslims were not willing to easily give up their control of important ports throughout the Indian Ocean, but the Portuguese used cannons to blast their way into Malacca, Calicut, Hormuz, and Goa. Columbus was always interested in trumping the Portuguese domination of eastward trade. He worked as a map maker, was familiar with navigational technology, and had a successful voyage to the Americas. Columbus was a deeply religious man who believed that Christianity was to be carried to places throughout the world. He intended to sail to the Mongol court in the Far East by passing the island of Japan and then the east coast of China. Columbus found financing from the Spanish throne of Ferdinand and Isabella. The Spanish crown agreed to make him viceroy over any territory he might discover. He landed in the Bahamas, which he named San Salvador. From San Salvador, he sailed southwest and landed on Cuba, which he believed to be mainland China. Disappointed, he gave up on his aim of meeting the Mongols and set out to find riches for Spain. Columbus always believed he had found islands that were off the coast of Asia. Amerigo Vespucci understood what Columbus did not. He considered the New World as a continent separate from Asia. The Treaty of Tordesillas settled agreements between Spain and Portugal, giving Spain control of everything west of an imaginary line drawn down the Atlantic. Portugal received everything to the east. Spanish exploration and expansion in South America was determined by profits. Caribbean profits appeared to be insignificant compared to Portugal's riches from the Asian trade. Spain continued to search for a western trade passage to Asia. Magellan sailed southwest to Brazil and located the end of the South American continent. He then sailed up the west coast of South America. He continued to sail west, and after terrible storms, disease, starvation, and other forms of troubles, 2 of Magellan's 5 ships attempted mutiny. 1 ship was lost, while the other sailed back to Spain. Magellan was killed off the coast of the Philippines. Now the expedition had only enough men to sail 2 ships. One was finally captured by the Portuguese, while the last ship eventually returned to Spain, the only ship to circumnavigate the globe. Explorers now realized not only the vastness of the Pacific Ocean, but also that the Earth was much larger than anyone had thought. Explorers for northern European powers included John Cabot, who discovered Newfoundland for England. Martin Frobisher made 3 voyages to Canada for England between 1576 and 1578. And Jacques Cartier made voyages to and explored the St. Lawrence region of Canada for France between 1534 and 1541, trading with local peoples.